Dean Martin was halfway through his set at the Sands when he saw it, a gun. Not in someone's hand, not pointed at him, not yet. It just sat there, gleaming under the low lights, resting casually on the velvet tablecloth in front of a man in the front row. A man whose name you whispered in Vegas, but never dared say out loud. Dean paused mid-song. The band kept playing. The audience froze. The man? Vincent Antonelli, a name that made even casino bosses break into a cold sweat. A top enforcer in Nevada's most feared crime family. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. He was staring straight at Dean Martin. And in front of him, a loaded weapon, plain as day. What Dean did next should have ended his career or his life. Instead, it made him a legend. Without flinching, Dean Martin stepped forward and offered the mobster his microphone. Why would anyone do that? To answer that, you need to understand the world Dean was performing in. A city owned by the mob, an entertainer with nothing to prove, and one terrifying rumor that nearly sparked a hit on one of America's most beloved stars. And that is where this story begins. In 1965, Las Vegas didn't belong to tourists. It didn't belong to high rollers or hotel moguls. It belonged to the mob. Behind every bright light on the strip, behind every clinking chip and clapping crowd, there was a shadow. The casinos? Mob-owned. The hotels? Mob-financed. The showroom stages? Managed and monitored by men who didn't take no for an answer. And everyone knew it. Entertainers knew their role. Sing, dance, smile, and stay out of business that wasn't theirs. Because this wasn't just about putting on a show. This was about keeping the peace in a city where the wrong joke or the wrong friend could get you hurt, or worse. The Sands Hotel, Dean Martin's stomping ground, was one of the crown jewels of mob-controlled Vegas. On the surface, it was all glitz, champagne, celebrity sightings, the Rat Pack ruling the room. But backstage, it was a tightrope walk. Everyone smiled, but no one forgot who really signed their checks and who could make you disappear. Frank Sinatra knew the rules. So did Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop. The Rat Pack weren't just icons. They were guests in someone else's kingdom. They played their parts, cracked their jokes, and stayed in line. Everyone knew where the line was. Everyone, except maybe Dean Martin. Because Dean didn't play scared. He wasn't impressed by power or intimidated by the men behind it. He had grown up in places where men like that were everywhere. And that made him dangerous in a town where fear was the real currency. Before the fame, before the tuxedos and martinis, before the Sands marquee lit up with his name, Dean Martin was just Dino Crocetti from Steubenville, Ohio, a town where the American dream had a few broken teeth and a baseball bat in the trunk. Steubenville wasn't polished. It was run down, tough, and wired into the underworld. Illegal gambling wasn't a secret, it was a lifestyle. Dean's own father worked in a barber shop that doubled as a front for local mob operations. Haircuts in the front, dice games in the back. So Dean grew up watching how these men moved, how they talked, how they controlled rooms without ever raising their voice. And more importantly, what happened to people who disrespected them. But instead of being scared, Dean studied it. He learned early that fear got you hurt. Confidence, even fake confidence, could save your life. You didn't challenge these men, but you also didn't grovel. You stayed cool. You stayed sharp. And when things got tense, you played it smooth. And Dean was smooth. That streetwise calm would serve him well in showbiz. He didn't break a sweat on stage, never looked nervous, never looked like he needed anyone's approval. He had a smirk that said, "I've seen worse than you." Because he had. By the time he made it big, Dean wasn't just famous, he was unshakable. To most people, that was part of the act. But the truth? That calm came from growing up in a world where men disappeared for disrespect, and Dean had survived it. So when the mob started circling him again in Vegas, he didn't flinch. He'd danced on this tightrope before, and he knew exactly how to keep his balance. It started with a knock on the dressing room door. Dean Martin was flipping through a magazine, getting ready for his evening set at the Sands, when his assistant, Jackie Romano, opened the door and froze. Standing in the hallway was a man in an expensive suit, sharp as a blade and just as silent. Jackie's face went pale. He recognized the guy immediately, one of Vincent Antonelli's men. "Mr. Martin," the man said, stepping into the room uninvited. "Mr. Antonelli would like a word. After the show. In private." Dean didn't even look up. "Tell Mr. Antonelli I'm tired after shows these days." Maybe another time. The man didn't blink. Mr. Antonelli insists. That got Dean's attention. He stood, set down the magazine, and locked eyes with the messenger. No smile. No joke. Then tell Mr. Antonelli that Dean Martin doesn't take meetings with people who send messengers. If he's got something to say, he can come here himself. Ask nicely. The silence hung heavy. The man nodded slowly, then turned and walked out. Jackie was shaking. Dean, do you know who that was? Dean nodded, unconcerned. Yeah, Antonelli's guy. You can't just blow him off like that. He's Vincent Antonelli. People disappear because of him. Dean shrugged. I don't work for Vincent Antonelli, kid. I work for the Sands. And last I checked, I'm the one selling out this place, not him. But Jackie wasn't wrong. Vincent Antonelli wasn't just some local thug. He was a top-tier enforcer in the Nevada crime family. His name alone could clear a room. He was linked to a dozen murders, maybe more. Not that anything was ever proven. Mob guys feared him. Other mob guys. When Antonelli sent for you, you didn't ask why. You showed up. Unless you were Dean Martin. Dean had spent his life around tough guys. He'd learned their tells, their tactics, and the most important rule of all, if you show fear, you're already done. So Dean didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He went right back to reading his magazine. But what he didn't know yet was that Antonelli wasn't used to being ignored. And when a man like that feels disrespected, things escalate fast. The next night, same time, same place. Dean was peeling off his bow tie after another sold-out show when the messenger returned, like clockwork. Mr. Antonelli is waiting downstairs, he said, this time with steel behind the words. He'd like to speak with you now. Dean didn't even pause. He smiled. Tell him I already left for the night. The messenger blinked. But Mr. Martin, you're standing right here. Dean turned, grin still in place. Am I? Could have sworn I left 10 minutes ago. The man's jaw tightened. Mr. Martin, I don't think you understand. No. Dean cut in, voice now cool as ice. I understand perfectly. I just finished working my *** off for 2 hours. I'm tired. I'm going to have a drink and go to bed. Now you can deliver that message, or stand there all night. Up to you. The messenger stormed off. Jackie Romano nearly had a breakdown. Dean, you're going to get yourself **led. You have to talk to Frank. Frank can fix this. But Dean wouldn't budge. I'm not dragging Sinatra into this. And I'm sure as hell not groveling to some thug who thinks he owns me. I'm Dean Martin. I don't jump when someone snaps their fingers. But across the casino, word was spreading fast. Vincent Antonelli was furious. And when a mob boss gets humiliated, not once, but twice, he doesn't just get mad. He gets dangerous. By the third day, the quiet whispers had turned into warnings. Pit bosses, stagehands, even cocktail waitresses who knew the mob's mood all said the same thing. Make peace with Antonelli. Now. But Dean still refused. And then came the final push. That night, his longtime manager, Herman Citron, came to Dean's dressing room. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dean, I'm begging you. 5 minutes. That's all. Just take the meeting. Dean raised an eyebrow. Why? What does he want? Herman hesitated, glanced at the closed door. It's about a woman. Dean blinked. A woman? Yeah, his girlfriend. Dancer at the Tropicana. Word is, she's been talking about leaving Vegas. Heading to Hollywood. He thinks maybe you encouraged her. Dean laughed out loud. I've never even met her. Doesn't matter, Herman said. Vincent believes it. And in his world, belief is all it takes. Dean's face hardened. Then he's got the wrong guy. I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do. Dean, Herman said, voice cracking. This isn't about right or wrong. It's about survival. But Dean just turned away, reached for a drink, and muttered, if Vincent's got a problem, he can come to me like a man. I don't deal in threats and secondhand drama. Herman shook his head. He knew Dean too well. Once his mind was made up, nothing short of a miracle or a murder was going to change it. And unfortunately, one of those two was coming fast. June 18th, 1965. The day everything exploded. Dean Martin arrived at the Sands around 6 p.m., like always. Same walk through the lobby. Same nods from hotel staff. But something was different. The air felt heavier. Whispers followed him through the casino like shadows. Security guards stood stiffer than usual. Employees kept glancing toward the showroom, then away. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew. Tonight wasn't going to be just another Dean Martin performance. At 8:30, Jackie burst into Dean's dressing room. Pale, sweating, barely able to form words. "Dean, you need to cancel the show." Dean calmly adjusted his cufflinks. "Why would I do that?" "Because Vincent Antonelli just bought out the first 3 rows. He's here, with 20 of his guys. They're already in their seats." Dean paused for half a second, then looked in the mirror and adjusted his bow tie. "So they bought tickets?" he said, deadpan. "Then I guess they're audience members. Like everybody else." "Dean, this isn't a joke." Jackie snapped. "They're not here to clap. They're here to send a message." Dean turned to him, completely calm. "Then I'd better give them one worth remembering." 9 p.m. The Copa room was packed. 2,800 people shoulder to shoulder, dressed to the nines, buzzing with anticipation. But the energy wasn't electric. It was wired, sharp, tense. Like the whole room knew something bad was about to happen and no one dared say it out loud. Dean stepped onto the stage, greeted by thunderous applause, except from the first 3 rows. They didn't clap. They didn't smile. They just watched. Dead center sat Vincent Antonelli, 250 pounds of muscle, scars, and cold calculation. His expression blank. His eyes locked onto Dean like a loaded rifle. Dean smiled anyway. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly. "Welcome to the Sands. We've got a great show tonight. I'll sing, I'll joke, and if we're lucky, I might even make it out alive." The crowd laughed, nervously. The band struck up the opening chords of Ain't That a Kick in the Head. Dean moved across the stage like he always did. Casual, charismatic, untouchable. But his eyes kept drifting to the front row. To him, Antonelli didn't blink, didn't clap, didn't smile. Dean finished the song to roaring applause, except from the front 3 rows. They stayed silent, like statues. He grabbed the mic again, grinning. Thank you. You're too kind. Although I noticed some of you up front seem a little quiet tonight. Don't worry. I know it's hard to clap when your hands are busy." A few people chuckled. Most held their breath. The mobsters didn't move. Dean rolled into the next song. Memories are made of this. Halfway through, he saw it. Antonelli reached into his jacket. Dean's voice faltered, just for a second. But the mob boss wasn't pulling a gun. He pulled out a cigarette. Lit it. Slow. Deliberate. His eyes never left Dean's face. And then he did it. He dragged a single finger slowly across his throat. A clear message. Every musician on stage saw it. So did the crowd nearby. A low murmur rippled through the room like static. The band kept playing, for a few bars, then drifted into silence. Dean Martin stood there, center stage, staring into the eyes of a man who had ended people for less. The audience waited. Frozen. 2,800 people, waiting to see if this was the moment Dean Martin died. And then he smiled. Dean Martin stood frozen, but only for a second. He'd just seen one of the most feared men in Las Vegas drag a finger across his own throat, a silent threat delivered with the calm of someone who didn't need to raise his voice. A warning that had ended careers and lives. The room was dead silent. The band hung in limbo, eyes flicking between Dean and Antonelli. The audience held their breath. And Dean smiled. "Folks," he said into the microphone, voice as smooth as scotch, "we're going to take a little break from the planned program." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. "See," he continued, "we've got a gentleman in the front row tonight who seems to be making some very passionate gestures. And you know me, I'm all about giving people a chance to express themselves." The mobsters in the front row didn't move. Antonelli's eyes narrowed, but he didn't blink. Dean started walking toward him. The audience tensed like a coiled spring. The security team backstage was frozen. The band didn't dare breathe. Dean reached the edge of the stage and looked directly down at the man who could have him buried in the desert by morning. "Sir," Dean said, "I've noticed you've been making gestures at me all night. Now, I'm not sure if you're trying to tell me something or just practicing your sign language. But either way, it's a little distracting." Not a single sound in the room. Dean knelt down, held out the microphone. "In fact," he said, "why don't you come up here and say what's on your mind? You seem like you might have a nice voice. Ever thought about joining the act?" No sarcasm, no fear, just that signature smirk, cooler than ice, sharper than a razor. It was the kind of move that could get a man shot. Right there, in front of everyone. And then, something unbelievable happened. Vincent Antonelli started to laugh. Not a warm laugh, not a belly laugh, but a cold, calculating chuckle from a man who didn't laugh unless he meant it. He stared at Dean Martin, microphone still extended, completely unfazed. A man who wasn't intimidated, wasn't backing down, and somehow wasn't dead. "You got balls, Martin," Antonelli said, his voice carrying across the stunned room. Dean raised an eyebrow. "Is that a yes on the singing? Because I should warn you, acoustics up here are fantastic. Hope you've been practicing." Antonelli shook his head, still smirking. "Nah, you keep singing, Dean. That's what you're good at." Dean stood up slowly, still smiling. "Well, the offer stands. Anytime you want to take the mic, just say the word." The mob boss nodded. "Keep doing your thing, Martin. You're all right." And just like that, the storm passed. Dean turned back to the audience, still stunned into silence. "Well, folks," he said, adjusting the mic stand. "Looks like I'll be finishing this one myself after all." A beat of hesitation. Then applause. Nervous at first, then thunderous. Dean smiled. "But before we continue, let's give a round of applause to my friend in the front row. He's a tough critic, but a fair one." Even Antonelli raised his glass in a mock toast. And with that, Dean launched right back into the show like nothing had happened. Except everyone in that room knew something had happened, and it had just become the coolest moment in Vegas history. The show went on like nothing happened. For the next hour, Dean Martin sang, joked, and owned the stage like only he could. But the entire room still felt the aftershock of that moment. The throat slash, the microphone, the silence, and the laugh. Vincent Antonelli didn't leave. He and his men stayed in those front rows, watching every second. But now, they applauded. They smiled. They drank. It wasn't exactly warm, but it was no longer ice cold. And when the show ended, something even stranger happened. They stood up and clapped. Full-on applause from the men who were supposed to deliver a message. The same men who had stared down Dean Martin like wolves now treated him like royalty. Backstage, Dean toweled off, poured himself a scotch, and exhaled for the first time all night. Then, another knock. Jackie opened the dressing room door and froze. Vincent Antonelli was standing there, alone. "Can I come in?" he asked. Dean didn't flinch. "Sure. You want a drink?" "Yeah," Antonelli said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "Scotch, if you got it." Dean poured 2 glasses. No small talk. No jokes. They stood there, face to face. One man who ran Las Vegas from the shadows, and another who just walked through those shadows without flinching. Finally, Antonelli spoke. "You know why I wanted to meet with you?" Dean nodded. "Heard something about a dancer." "My girl," Antonelli said, voice steady. "She's been talking about leaving town, going to Hollywood. I thought maybe you were putting that idea in her head." Dean shook his head. "I don't even know who she is." "I know that now," Antonelli said. "Turns out it was some casting agent. Already took care of it." Dean didn't ask what took care of it meant. He didn't want to know. The mob boss took a sip of his scotch. "The thing is," he continued, "I sent my guy to talk to you 3 times. You blew him off 3 times. In front of my people. That makes me look weak." Dean met his eyes. "So you came to my show to scare me?" Antonelli smirked. "Something like that. But you didn't scare. Not for a second." "I don't scare easy," Dean said quietly. "No, you don't." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Antonelli reached out his hand. "We're good, Dean. You and me. You didn't do anything wrong. And I respect a man who stands his ground." Dean shook it. Firm. No hesitation. "Appreciate it, Vincent." Antonelli turned to leave, but paused at the door. "One thing, Dean. Next time I send someone to talk to you, maybe don't make me send him 3 times. Dean smiled. "Deal." And just like that, it was over. No violence. No threats. No fear. Just 2 men who understood each other now. On a level most people never will. One ruled the city from the shadows. The other ruled the stage with a microphone and a smirk. And that night, they met in the middle. When the spotlight faded and the curtain dropped, most performers would have collapsed from the sheer stress of what just happened. But Dean? He was in his dressing room, cool as ever, pouring himself a drink. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He did what he always did after a show, poured a scotch, loosened his tie, and let the adrenaline settle. Then came the knock. But this time, there was no messenger. No middleman. Just Vincent Antonelli, alone. Jackie opened the door and froze like he'd seen a ghost. Vincent didn't say a word at first. Just stood in the doorway, composed but unreadable. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low and calm. Dean didn't hesitate. Sure. You want a drink? Antonelli stepped inside like he owned the room. And in a way, he probably did. Scotch, if you got it. Dean poured 2 glasses and handed one over without ceremony. No words, no small talk. Just 2 men standing in silence, sizing each other up now that the show was over and the crowd was gone. Vincent took a sip. Then he broke the silence. You know why I wanted to meet with you? Dean nodded slightly. Heard it was about a dancer. Your girl. Vincent gave a single nod. She's been talking about leaving town, heading to Hollywood. I thought maybe you were behind it. Whispering in her ear, giving her ideas. Dean met his gaze, calm and honest. I don't even know who she is. I know that now, Antonelli said. Turns out it was someone else. Some casting guy. Dean didn't ask what happened to the casting guy. He didn't want to know. Antonelli took another drink, letting the silence settle again before continuing. But see, Dean, I sent my guy to talk to you 3 times. 3. And you blew him off. Each time. In front of my men. In front of this whole city. Dean didn't apologize. Didn't make excuses. He just said what needed to be said. I don't like threats. I don't take meetings with messengers. Antonelli nodded slowly, almost like he respected that answer more than he wanted to admit. You made me look weak, Dean. I can't have that. That's why I showed up tonight. To make a point. Dean took a sip of his scotch. And, did you make it? Antonelli smirked. I was gonna. But then you walked up, handed me a microphone, and asked if I wanted to sing. He laughed. Just once. Dry but real. That takes guts. Or stupidity. Dean smiled. Maybe both. Antonelli stared at him for a moment. Then he extended his hand. We're good, Dean. You didn't do anything wrong. And I respect a man who doesn't flinch. Dean shook his hand without breaking eye contact. No fear. No bowing. Just mutual understanding. Vincent turned to leave, but before he opened the door, he looked back one last time. But next time I send somebody to talk to you. Dean nodded. I'll listen the first time. Antonelli grinned. Good. I'd hate to waste good seats again. And just like that, the most dangerous night of Dean Martin's career ended with a handshake and a drink. No violence. No threats. Just raw charisma, bulletproof confidence, and one man's refusal to be anyone's puppet. It was over, but the legend? That was just beginning. By the next morning, the story had already grown wings. Whispers turned into headlines behind closed doors. Dean Martin had stared down Vincent Antonelli, the Vincent Antonelli, and lived to talk about it. Not just lived one. He hadn't backed down. He hadn't called for help. He didn't blink. Instead, he'd cracked a joke, held out a mic, and dared one of the most feared men in Vegas to step up or shut up. And the mob boss? He laughed. He stayed. He applauded. That night changed everything. Not just for Dean, but for every performer in Vegas. Before that night, entertainers were just employees. Replaceable. Disposable. You were there to fill a seat and keep the chips flowing. You didn't talk back. You didn't make waves. You certainly didn't confront the people who could bury you without a whisper. But Dean shattered that dynamic. He showed that charisma, real charisma, could be more powerful than fear. That respect could be earned not through violence, but through unshakable confidence and the kind of cool that couldn't be faked. Frank Sinatra called him the next day. Are you out of your mind? He asked. Do you know what Antonelli could have done to you? Dean just shrugged. Yeah, he could have done a lot of things. But he didn't. When Frank asked why he didn't just take the meeting the first time, Dean's answer was simple. Because if I ran when he snapped his fingers, I'd be running forever. And that was it. That was Dean Martin. A man who made his name smiling through smoke, making crowds howl, and never losing his cool, even with a loaded gun on the table. Over the years, the story morphed into myth. Some said Dean pulled a gun of his own. Others swore Antonelli tried to come on stage. The truth? It didn't need embellishment. Because what really happened was better than fiction. Dean faced down a killer with nothing but a microphone and a smirk, and walked away not just alive, but respected. They saw each other now, and then after that, nods exchanged across casino floors. Antonelli even came to more shows, front row, smiling, clapping. And when he was gunned down in a mob hit years later, Dean didn't gloat. He simply said, Vincent was a tough guy, but a fair guy. In his way, he had honor. Dean never bragged about that night. Never told the story to pump up his image. If anything, he downplayed it. People make too much of it, he'd say. I just didn't want some guy ruining my show. So I addressed it. But the ones who were there? They knew better. They saw a man walk into the lion's den and tell the lion to sit down or grab a mic. And the lion listened. That's not just cool. That's Dean Martin.